Hi everyone, welcome to Save the Frogs Academy. I am Dr. Kerry Kriger, and can everyone send me a message so I can make sure that you can hear what I'm saying right now in your little chat screen?
I called in on the phone.
Okay, awesome. So, all right, let me just read these messages. Okay, good. So basically we've got an hour and a half, and I'm going to tell you all about frogs, why they're disappearing, why they're important, ways you can help, ways that Save the Frogs protects frog populations, and talk about Save the Frogs Academy, which I'm happy that you are all interested in taking part in, and have a lot of faith that Save the Frogs Academy will do a great job training people like you to be able to do the things that I do with Save the Frogs, and therefore get a lot more done for amphibian populations. And in training you to protect frogs, we will be getting a lot done because we'll be doing real-world projects that need assistance. So let's see. All right, my slideshow works. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a few things, natural history of frogs, and some of you may have seen me give this presentation or one like it before. I've given this basic presentation over 200 times, and even if you've seen it, it's good to see it again because there's a lot of info, and the more clearly you can relay this info to everyone around you, the better off you'll be an advocate for the frogs. And I've given this talk so many times that I know that people like it, and it's got a lot of information, and there's a lot of people who've still not heard it. So hopefully, excuse me, you'll be able to go out there into the public, schools, community groups, talking to politicians, whoever, and either give this talk as a slideshow or just pass that information on clearly to the people. Save the Frogs, a lot of what we do is just about communicating our message to people so that people understand the problems frogs are facing and can take action to help them. And I'll stop occasionally throughout this to see if anyone has questions, and certainly I'm saving some time for the end of this class to take all your questions. Okay, so we're called Save the Frogs, but our mission is actually all about amphibians, and there's 5 types of amphibians, which frogs are the most well-known. We've got the frogs are the most well-known group. There's 6,000 or so known species of frogs and toads. Frogs and toads are actually kind of the same group. They're basically the same. Toads, though, have this parotoid gland, big fat gland. Let me see if I have a little, well, you all can see it right behind the ear. There's a big fat gland that's packed full of toxins, and toads use that to protect themselves. Toads tend to have shorter legs than frogs, tend to have bumpier skin, but in reality, frogs can have toxins on their skin. Frogs can have short legs. Frogs can have rough skin. So frogs and toads, essentially the same. Salamanders and newts are another group of amphibians, and they have the tails. So out here, I'm in Santa Cruz, California. We've got arboreal salamanders. Yesterday, I was flipping logs and found a lot of California slender salamanders. Mute button. Okay. California slender salamanders, yellow-eyed ensitinas, saw one of these guys yesterday. So salamanders, if you're out in the wet season, flip some logs. They like to hang out under there to protect themselves. And because it's cool and moist, and amphibians have a need to be in moist places. Most of them are amphibious, living on both land and water. Even if they don't live in the water, like some of these salamanders you're seeing, they still need moisture because they put their eggs down in the moist leaf litter, and those eggs have to stay wet for reasons I'll tell you real soon. Long-toed salamander from Washington State. So newts and salamanders are pretty much the same. Newts tend to have a lot of toxins on their skin. They move really slowly, so they need to protect themselves. They can't jump erratically like a frog to escape their predator. So they have lots of toxins. California newts' toxins are so strong they can kill a person. And the final type of amphibian, so we've got the frogs and toads, salamanders and newts, and caecilians. No arms, no legs, no tail. Very small eyes because they live underground. They're fossorial, and they're in Central South America, Asia, and Africa. None of them in the United States or Canada, where I think all our callers are from. Attendees. Okay, so reptiles and amphibians are often confused. Several hundred years ago, biologists thought they were the same group, so they came up with the name herpetology, the study of amphibians and or reptiles. But back then, they were all the same. There was no difference. But now we know there's a big difference between reptiles and amphibians. Reptiles have scales on their skin, like you can see right here. Reptiles have hard-shelled eggs, like a bird's egg, but amphibian eggs are jelly-like with no hard protective coating, and that's why they have to stay wet. And because their eggs need to stay wet, they put them in ponds, streams, moist places, and they breed generally during the wet season or at big rains, or they'll live in a cloud forest where maybe it's wet all year. And then they turn into a tadpole. Frogs and toads, not all of them, not all species, but most of them have a aquatic larval stage. The tadpole, generally herbivorous. They'll be eating algae in the water. But they can become carnivorous if their pond is drying up, and they need to gain energy to metamorphose and get out of there. They could start eating each other or other species. So they have gills like a fish, tail to help them swim, and then they pop out some legs, some arms, gills turn into lungs. They crawl out of the water, and they're called a metamorph while they're still in that middle stage. So you can see the tail on these guys. And then they're a full-grown frog, like this red-webbed gladiator frog I found in Panama. You can check out their feet. Frogs' feet tell you a lot about where they live and how they live. He's got webbing because he's in the water all the time. Tree frogs will have a suction-y toe pads to help them climb. Frogs that just live on the ground terrestrially probably won't have either. And frogs eat pretty much anything that fits in their mouth. When they're adults, they're carnivores. So they're called gape-limited predators. They don't care what it is. If it's alive, it could be another frog or a fly or a sack of insects' eggs, and they'll eat it if it fits in their mouth. So a little bit about me. I got into amphibian conservation in 2003, so it's been about 10 years. And before that, I was just broadly into environmental conservation. I actually studied mechanical engineering at the University of Virginia, and right at the end of that decided I wanted to see what environmental science was all about, and I went to Hawaii and spent a summer there volunteering for PhD students who were working on endangered birds, and I thought that was awesome. Didn't want to focus on birds for my PhD, so come 2003, I went to Australia to study frogs, which I had recently learned were rapidly disappearing, so that sounded pretty interesting to me. And I spent 4 years in Australia doing my PhD research on the ecology of chytridiomycosis in eastern Australia. Chytridiomycosis is a potentially lethal skin disease that's driving amphibians to extinction all around the world. I'll talk about that in a little bit. So where I was in Queensland had about 30 different amphibian species, and I'd go out catching frogs, catch them in a plastic bag, run a cotton swab over their skin to pick up DNA off their skin to see if they had DNA of the Kitteridge fungus, and then I'd let the frogs go. To catch them, I'd have to hear them or see them, get close to them, and know what species I was collecting, or not collecting, but picking up momentarily. So first off, all frogs are making, or most frogs are calling. The male frogs of each species call. They all have a different call. Cascade tree frog goes. So I'd hear that, and then if I did it myself, they'd call back, and I could track them, get closer to them, find them, catch them, get my sample. So cascade tree frogs, emerald spotted tree frogs. You can see the cool toe pads on this female, and webbing. Awesome eye. Emerald spots are there for camouflage. Southern orange-eyed tree frog, my favorite frog. Scarlet-sided pobblebonk goes bonk. Eastern sedge frog. So this is how frogs call. They have a vocal sac. Sometimes they have two vocal sacs. Fill it up with air, create pressure. And the males are calling to defend their territory and attract a mate. Great barred frog. You can see the bars on its legs. Big frogs make deep calls. This is a big frog. Or striped marsh frog. And marsupial frogs are an interesting frog. They're terrestrial breeders, like some of those salamanders I showed you, which means they don't have a tadpole stage. They may never go to water, not to standing water, but they live in the moist leaf litter up in the mountains where it's cloudy all the time. So it's pretty moist, and certainly if it rains, they'll be out there calling. And they're terrestrial breeders, so they lay their eggs in the moist leaf litter, and out from the egg emerges baby froglets, and 15 or so froglets will crawl into the pouch on either side of the male. So right now, you can see that little pouch, and let me try to get my pointer. Right there. There's the pouch. Now you can't see it, so I'll erase it. There we go. Okay, so frogs live some... let's see. Yeah, frogs are pretty awesome, but they're having lots of troubles. 2,000 amphibian species approximately threatened with extinction. Threatened with extinction means if we don't do anything to remove those threats or ameliorate them, then we can expect them to go completely extinct in the near future. So frogs, it's about a third of all frog species, a third of all amphibian species threatened with extinction, which is a higher proportion than birds or reptiles or any vertebrate group. So they're in a lot of trouble. 200 amphibian species gone extinct in recent decades. They're disappearing several thousand times faster than they should be. So it's without a doubt one of the world's largest environmental problems. And one of the main causes is habitat destruction. 7 billion humans on the planet. Humans compete with frogs for space. Humans have houses, shopping malls, business centers, roads, swamps get drained for agriculture, and other problems like that. And frogs lose habitat and have a lot of trouble. So if we don't protect wilderness, it ends up looking like this, which is pretty bad habitat for frogs or any wildlife. California tiger salamander is one of our endangered species in Santa Cruz County. Santa Cruz long-toed salamanders. Oh, thought I had some pictures of habitat destruction for them. Both those species have trouble because their land gets converted to other uses by humans. Overharvesting for the pet and food trades. Brightly colored species have trouble with this because humans who want frogs as pets tend to like the brightly colored species like poison dart frogs. So several million wild-caught frogs get imported into the U.S. each year for use as pets. There's also a black market trade. Even bigger problem is frog legs trade. It's been estimated that between 100 million and 1 billion frogs get taken out of the wild each year for use as food, which is clearly an unsustainable number. These guys are from a market in Indonesia, the world's largest consumer and exporter of frogs, for frog legs. France and Belgium are the #1 and #2 importers. America's #3. We import 20% of the world's frog legs, and our frog leg consumption is on the rise. I think that's because frog leg farms are proliferating around the world, and the cost of frog meat is cheap. So more restaurants and supermarkets in America are selling it. And a lot of these frog farms are raising non-Native American bullfrogs, which I'll talk about. They cause lots of problems and they spread disease. So it doesn't matter if they're wild caught or farmed raised. The frog legs trade is really bad for the frog populations of the world. California red-legged frog, endangered frog out here in California, actually got nearly eaten to extinction by the California gold miners about 120 years ago. So they're still threatened because of that, still in low numbers now. They get eaten by the American bullfrogs, which got brought in as a replacement food source. And the American bullfrogs, so they got brought here 100+ years ago, and they've now spread throughout the American West, millions of them with very large mouths, eating whatever fits in their mouth. Invasive species are a big problem around the world, certainly in California, in the Sierra Nevada mountains, naturally fishless lakes because fish can't get up there because of the waterfalls. Frogs have evolved no defenses against fish, and over the last half century, the Fish and Game Commission of California and various fishing groups have been flying over the mountainous lakes, dumping out hundreds of thousands of non-native trout for fishermen's enjoyment into these lakes, and the trout pretty much decimate the amphibian populations. Mountain yellow-legged frogs now gone from 93% of their historic localities. They cannot coexist with fish. If you remove all the fish, then the frogs can repopulate the ponds, but there are lots of fishing groups who do not want the fish removed. Here's the American bullfrog I was talking about. Native to the eastern half of the USA and Canada. Now it's an invasive species in many states out west here in the U.S. and in British Columbia, and in about 15 countries around the world where it does not belong. They escape their frog farms, and they cause lots of problems because they're the largest frog in North America, which means they have a very large mouth. They can eat birds, bats, California red-legged frogs, California tiger salamanders. One got found with a 33-inch giant garter snake in its stomach. So they're voracious predators, and they have very high rates of infectious diseases because the frog farms are not very hygienic places. All the frogs are raised in closed quarters, crawling all over each other with their skin disease, chytridiomycosis, that I'll talk about very soon. Pollution and pesticides are a big problem for frogs and other amphibians because gravity brings all these chemicals down into the water, whether it comes straight out of your car or home or a factory near a river or goes up into the air and comes down in the form of rain. It all gets down into the water, and that's where the amphibians are living and breeding and going through susceptible life stages. Their embryos are in their permeable skin and jelly-like eggs that all that chemical is just going straight through. So pollution and pesticides are big problems for frogs. Coal is responsible for about half of our electricity in the United States. We dump lots of coal ash, millions of tons of it, into the environment each year. It's got lots of heavy metals. It all gets into the water, causes lots of problems for amphibians, like deformed mouth parts of tadpoles, delayed metamorphosis, reduced body mass at metamorphosis. And there's also lots of pesticides, 18,000 plus registered pesticides in the United States. Atrazine is one we're working on getting banned. It's been in use for over 50 years in over 50 countries, and Syngenta, the world's largest pesticide company, celebrates atrazine because they make billions of dollars off it every year. But atrazine is an endocrine disruptor that turns male frogs into females at 2.5 parts per billion and causes hermaphroditism, immunosuppression, known bad effects on reptiles and fish as well, linked to cancer in humans. And we use 80 million pounds of it every year, primarily on corn, our largest crop in America, but also on sugar, sorghum, rice, millet, Christmas trees, lawn care, lots of places. So I'll talk about our atrazine campaign in a bit. Climate change is a problem for frogs. They need water. They need moisture for their eggs. So if they're in a cloud forest and the earth warms up, what happens is the cloud moves up the mountain and amphibians have trouble because their habitat dries up and their eggs dry up. Here in America, Yellowstone National Park, where this boreal chorus frog lives, the ponds have been drying up in the park because they've had persistent droughts for 50 years. And now 3 of the 4 amphibian species in the park are on the decline because their habitats are drying up. And this is in the world's oldest protected area. So climate change doesn't matter if it's a national park, it's still going to affect the wildlife there. Chytrid fungus is the causative agent of chytridiomycosis, which in terms of biodiversity is the worst disease in recorded history, not just for frogs, but for any type of wildlife. It's driven about 100 amphibian species to complete extinction in recent decades. And it's spreading around the world because humans ship about 100 million amphibians around the world each year for pets, food, bait, zoos, laboratory usage, with very little disease testing or quarantine in America. And I think just about every country I can think of other than Australia, it's completely legal to import chytrid-infected frogs into the country. Our government in California and federal government, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, never done anything to prevent, and nothing that I know of to prevent chytrid fungus from coming into the country. So that's a huge problem. Australia took action immediately about 10 years ago, maybe even a little bit longer than that, because they realized that chytrid quickly drove 7 or 8 of their amphibian species to extinction, and they saw no benefit from importing frogs into their country if those frogs were going to be responsible for the extinction of native frogs. So before I tell you why frogs are important, if anybody has a question, or I'll keep talking, but if you do have a question right now, go ahead and, there we go. Sounds like we have a question. No, I don't know what that was. Okay, anyway, if you have a question, go ahead and chat it in. We don't have hand-raising abilities in our current software. Hopefully we will soon, but till now, just send in a question while I tell you why frogs are important. Okay, so frogs eat ticks, mosquitoes, flies that carry West Nile virus, malaria, dengue fever, leishmaniasis, and other diseases we don't want. So they're doing us a big favor in that respect. Tadpoles eat and filter algae, which keeps our water clean by the time it gets to our community filtration systems, which a lot of us depend on. They've already done some of the work so that keeps the cost of cleaning our water down. Frogs are food for fish, birds, snakes, monkeys, even dragonflies and beetles eat tadpoles and eggs. So if frogs disappear, lots of other wildlife have trouble. And frogs are used in medical research that benefits humans. About 10% of Nobel Prizes in physiology and medicine have come from research that depended on frogs. A lot of our medical advances have come from research on frogs and salamanders. First several decades of cloning research was done on amphibians. This guy right here, southern orange-eyed tree frog, has chemicals on its skin that can kill HIV. So a lot of people ask me, should we have research on frogs? And I'm sure that a lot of the research that goes on is pretty unethical, but it can certainly be improved. And some of it, like with this guy, is just about skin secretions. So you don't need to harm the amphibian. And it is one reason to keep them alive, because if amphibians go extinct, then there goes any potential benefit that we have to promote human health through the continued existence of frogs. And it's a way to get people who may not care about any other reasons to actually care about and understand the importance of saving the frogs. Frogs are bioindicators. That means they're early warning systems of environmental decay. They have permeable skin that absorbs chemicals. They're dependent on healthy land and water. If anything goes wrong with either, they can have trouble. And they're slow to move, so if their habitat gets destroyed, they're probably going to die. It's very hard for them to fly off like a bird. And if they try to travel to a new place, they probably have to go through inhospitable terrain, and they may desiccate in the hot sun or get picked off by a predator. So they have, they're very sensitive to environmental decay, so we're able to look at frogs and judge the health of our ecosystem. And they've been around for hundreds of millions of years in more or less their current form. They did just fine for hundreds of millions of years, surviving countless ice ages, asteroid crashes, volcanic explosions, and yet in the last half century we've managed to drive about a third of them to the edge of extinction. So they're telling us something's drastically wrong in our environment that needs to get fixed. And frogs are cool. Most people like frogs. Frogs make the world a more interesting place, and without them, we'd certainly have a less exciting planet. So that's probably why most people are actually into frogs, just because frogs are cool. So just make the world a nicer place to live. We should save the frogs. Okay, so we do have a couple questions. What was the name of the company involved with atrazine? The name of the company is Syngenta. They're based in Switzerland, where atrazine is illegal. Atrazine has been illegal in the European Union for nearly 10 years. And the main reason it got banned is because it consistently showed up in European water supply, drinking water supply, at higher levels than is allowed for any pesticide. Atrazine is very persistent. It's still detectable in French soil 15 years since they've used it there. Were cane toads posing a problem to the native frog species in Australia? Cane toads are an invasive species in many parts of the world because in the 1920s or so there was a conference in the Caribbean for farmers, and somebody there gave a talk saying that cane toads will control the pests to the sugar cane. So people started exporting cane toads from Central and South America, and 104 of them ended up in Australia in 1935 and have become hundreds of millions, which are definitely causing problems for lots of native wildlife, because if you have hundreds of millions of pounds or kilos of cane toad, all that organic matter used to be native Australian flora and fauna. So that's all species that, or individuals that no longer exist, hundreds of millions of pounds of Australian native wildlife and plants. So yeah, cane toads do cause a problem. They compete for habitat, they compete for food, they can eat native species. They're I wouldn't say the #1 cause of frog problems in Australia, but they're certainly a problem. All right, moving on. So there's lots of ways that you all and everybody out there can help save the frogs just by improving your own ecological footprint, your day-to-day actions. Not using pesticides is a simple way to start. Buying organic food, not eating frog legs, slow down driving on wet nights. If it's rainy night, rainy season, if you're passing by a wetland, if you see one frog or salamander, there's probably more to come, so slow down. There's 700 million cars on the road. Turn off the tap. The American West, Australia, lots of places around the world have water conservation issues in that we're draining our rivers. Lots of rivers, large rivers, do not even make it to the sea because we take all the water out for showers, pools, irrigating, agricultural fields, etc. And when those rivers and their tributaries dry up, there goes habitat for the frogs. And also hot water could be heated by a coal-fired power plant, contributing to global warming and putting lots of pollution in the rivers. Don't purchase bottled water. If you don't know why bottled water is bad for the planet, go check out our How to Help page and start drinking tap water. Save yourself money. Save the planet. How you vote is incredibly important. As all you Canadians know, politicians have a huge effect on the environment. Some politicians don't care about the environment, and some do. So we need to make sure that we get environmentally friendly, frog-friendly politicians in office. Another way to help is spreading the word. One of the main reasons that I started Save the Frogs is because people would always ask me, why frogs? And I figured if people don't know why frogs are important, why they're cool, why they're, or even that they have problems and are disappearing, then we're going to have a lot of trouble saving the frogs. So my general view of most environmental issues is that environmental education is the basis of all environmental conservation. You can't get politicians or businesses to care if politicians and businesses aren't educated, if their constituents are not educated and asking them to do something beneficial. You can't get people to improve their ecological footprint if they don't know there's a problem or if they don't know how to make themselves more environmentally friendly. Can't get people sending letters, donating, protesting, or much of anything if people aren't educated. So all our campaigns are based around having an educated public. So the first 18 months of Save the Frogs, pretty much all we did was environmental education. We didn't have any campaigns at all. And still, even today, our focus is environmental education because our campaigns are only as successful as how educated people are. So please spread the word to all your friends, colleagues, etc. Thanks. So I'm going to tell you about Save the Frogs and run through some of our major programs. And before I do that, if someone has a question, send it in. And also, if someone wants to talk, they can say, if someone has a mic, which it looks like most of you do, and you'd like to ask a question live, just say, unmute me. Okay, so Save the Frogs, I founded in 2008. I had gotten back from Australia about 9 months prior, and I had finished up my PhD, was thinking about the next step in my career, and wanted to make sure that I did something as beneficial for amphibians as possible, and I couldn't think of anything that would be more important than starting a nonprofit organization dedicated to saving the frogs. because there were no other nonprofit organizations dedicated exclusively to amphibians. There was very little getting done to educate the public, to educate politicians, to get laws in place, to get land protected, to get frog legs out of restaurants, get get regulations for Kitteridge fungus, etc. So I founded Save the Frogs, and I didn't have much of a plan other than get the word out there, get lots of people involved, and take it from there. And that's worked pretty well. So for the first 2 years, I was probably the only employee, and now we're still pretty small in terms of employees. We've got maybe 2 or 3 full-time and 2 or 3 part-time people helping out, some interns from UC Santa Cruz, and we've got volunteers all around the world. And now we have Save the Frogs Academy students, which I'm very happy about, to get even more done. So it doesn't take a lot of people as long as your message is clear and you have a good grasp of modern-day telecommunications, which we're very fortunate to have, the internet. Save the Frogs would be far smaller if we didn't have the internet. So, always be thinking about how you can communicate to more people more clearly using modern-day technology. So let's see, we have a question before I continue. In the U.S., we've built hundreds of huge dams. What impact do they have on amphibian populations? Dams, hydroelectric facilities cause lots of problems for the environment in general. Of course, they do get us some clean energy, but not without a cost. They cover up habitat, so the rivers that once were there are now big ponds, which could attract different kind of frogs. But it definitely alters stream flow, when the stream is flowing, how strongly it's flowing, what temperature it is. And I don't know too many details of hydroelectric issues other than the foothill yellow-legged frog, Rana boylii, in California is very sensitive to all those aspects of streams that I just mentioned, and it does have a lot of problems from dams. California is a place with big water issues, and there's been huge amounts of habitat alteration for building ponds, draining ponds, damming rivers, irrigating rivers, and I know that that species has a lot of trouble, and I'm pretty sure they're still receiving either no or very little legal protection. They're not federally endangered, even though they are an endangered species. So hope that answers your question. And let's see, we got another one. Which species top the endangered species list in the U.S. at the moment? Now, if I recall the URL, savethefrogs.com/top10, you can check that out. I think it may be correct, or check it out later, but we compiled a list of the top 10 most endangered amphibian species with the assistance of the National Wildlife Federation, our partner. So yeah, it's hard to say to answer that. Houston toads, Wyoming toads have huge amount of problems, and I'm pretty sure the Wyoming toad, maybe even the Houston toad now, don't even survive in the wild anymore. They survive in captivity. The mountain yellow-legged frogs that I mentioned before are gone from 93% of their historic localities. And the southern mountain yellow-legged frog, I think it's down, I think they estimate less than 1,000 total individuals. And one of your assignments at the end of this class is going to be to go to amphibiaweb.org. And that's a great site where you can look up by geography what amphibians are there. You can search by threat status, look for how many critically endangered species there are, endangered species, vulnerable species, etc. Another question, what's the response been to your education attempts of politicians or policymakers so far? So I guess that depends on the politician. I meet with a decent number of politicians out here in California, and my representatives are representing the greater Santa Cruz area or even California, which both of them tend to be more environmentally forward-thinking than most places in the U.S. for certain. So when I meet with politicians, they're usually pretty open-minded, and some of them may already be into protecting the environment. So that would probably be different if I met politicians in name your place in your head that has lots of environmental problems and unfriendly politicians. So it probably depends wherever you go. But it's definitely helpful if you get kids writing the politicians, and we've gotten Save the Frogs Day recognized in lots of different places with the assistance in part of kids. It's very hard to turn down kids. So I think it's really important to get kids writing politicians and businesses. How do I think chemicals like chlorine and fluoride affect frogs and humans? I am not very knowledgeable when it comes to that issue. I know that there's always kind of ban the chlorine type movements in certain places, and you know, I'm not going to get it. I won't get into this because I've never read anything about its effect on frogs. I always think that if you have a chlorinated pool and frogs get in it, they're going to have some trouble. So I don't know about, you know, our tap water and how that level of chlorine is affecting things. All right, so Save the Frogs, founded in 2008. We're IRS-approved public charity, meaning donations to us are tax-deductible, tax-exempt. We get some other benefits as well. And let's see. I guess I'll move on. All of you have been to SaveTheFrogs.com. I guess before I move on, though, I'll say, when I think of what are our most important assets, Save the Frogs, aside from our awesome network of supporters and people like you, SaveTheFrogs.com is probably top of the list. Website was the second thing I ever did for Save the Frogs. And it's our way of educating millions of people and getting people educated and involved around the clock, getting the word out to places far away from California so people all over the world can check out the website, and that's a large reason that we have such a worldwide movement. In 2012, we had supporters in 75 countries. All right, Save the Frogs Day is what I have always considered our most important and most successful project that we run. I started Save the Frogs Day because there was no day dedicated to frogs, and I thought it would be a good way to get students involved. I never learned much of anything about frogs when I was growing up, and I can't think of any place with a government-mandated frog education for kids or students of any kind or age in schools or universities. So nobody's required to teach their students that amphibians are important and that they're disappearing. So it's up to us to get into the school system one way or another. And Save the Frogs Day has been very successful at that and at educating politicians. We've gotten Save the Frogs Day officially recognized by the governor of Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, state of Michigan, mayor of Washington, D.C., mayor of Vancouver, mayor of Tampa, mayor of Santa Cruz, and some other places. So that's good because politicians, when they're making these proclamations, are sane and signing on to the fact that they understand many of the threats to amphibians and their importance. And then hopefully the next time a vote comes, they'll be environmentally friendly, frog friendly. So it's been good for getting politicians involved and kids. The first Save the Frogs Day, we had 40 educational events in 15 countries. So that was in the very, very early days of Save the Frogs. I didn't have any employees. I didn't have many volunteers. Didn't have much funding at all. And we still got that much happening. So I thought, wow, that's pretty good. Let's see what we can do the next year. 2010, we had 104 events in 21 countries. And we got some cool events happening in South Korea, Ireland, scientists taking people out to show them wild frogs in their native habitats. Front page story in Le Mans, the largest paper in France. Third annual Save the Frogs Day, we had 145 events in 21 countries. Got a 2-minute spot on CNN Worldwide TV. And I went to Washington, D.C. to lead a rally at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to call for a federal ban on the use and production of Atrazine, the herbicide that can turn male frogs into females at 2.5 parts per billion. So we got a lot of publicity there. EPA heard about the rally, invited me to speak to their Office of Pesticide Programs a week later. So I gave an hour-long talk on the importance of frogs and the reasons to ban atrazine to their pesticide scientists and delivered over 10,000 petition signatures, for which they held a public call for comments about 6 months later. And I returned to the EPA last June to speak at their public hearing. It was open to anybody at their scientific advisory panel to give thoughts on atrazine. And I was the only person there at this public hearing speaking out against atrazine. There were 24 lobbyists there who wanted to keep atrazine legal. So that says something about the level of proactivity in our society. I'm not sure why no other environmental groups or environmental activists were there, but we've got a long way to go to get an $11 billion company to stop selling its chemicals in America if I'm the only person showing up. So this October 12th, we're having the International Day of Pesticide Action, which is our first time we conceived that and are coordinating it with the help of our 2 UC Santa Cruz interns. And we're going to have a rally in Washington, D.C. that I hope is as large as the rally going on there today that 350.org is holding to raise awareness of climate change. We need just as many people out protesting and speaking out against pesticides, because pesticides are a massive problem. We use a couple billion pounds of them around the world each year. They're in our food, they're in our water, they're in our ecosystems, and they don't get a lot of attention these days from the media or from people. So we really need to get people speaking out against pesticides. Otherwise, we're just going to live on a pesticide-covered planet. Okay, we've got one student, Alyssa, who's going to be there. Thank you. Alyssa, Washington, D.C., October 12th. But all you other people, the goal of it, it's called the International Day of Pesticide Action. We want it to be just like Save the Frogs Day, where we get people all around the world holding events in their community to educate people about pesticides. Okay, back to Save the Frogs Day. Yeah, so Get lots of kids involved. Avalon, right here in the middle. You've probably seen her before. 11 years old in Florida. Holds Save the Frogs Day events every year. Gets 100-plus people out there. She's on the radio. She's met with EPA before. Gets a lot done for frogs. So it really doesn't matter how old you are. You can save the frogs. Nepal, Save the Frogs Day. Uganda, 4th annual Save the Frogs Day, our largest yet. It was the largest day of amphibian education in the planet's history. We had about 200 events in 39 countries. Had our first Save the Frogs Day 5K in Seattle, which I was at. We had 4 biologists there giving presentations, got 260 runners. This year we're aiming for 750 runners. Hope to grow the 5K every year. 5Ks tend to get bigger and bigger each year, meaning more people educated, more funds raised for the frogs. So if you know people in Seattle, please tell them April 27th, Seattle, Save the Frogs Day 5K. Happy to have the National Wildlife Federation, which is the world's largest membership environmental organization with several million members, helping us out on Save the Frogs Day and with some other campaigns up at Yosemite. They held a big event last Save the Frogs Day. Bangladesh, we're happy to have Nurul Islam on the call right now, and he organized 12 events in Bangladesh last year, educating a couple thousand people, and I thought that was really awesome. They're really into Save the Frogs there, and we look forward to more of their support coming up in the near future with lots more Save the Frogs Day events and hopefully lots of other educational programs going on there as well. Lots of schools taking part in Save the Frogs Day. This one went out to remove non-native bullfrogs from this pond. Ghana, I'll talk to you about shortly. They were in on Save the Frogs Day. We've been doing a lot of work over there. So the 5th annual Save the Frogs Day coming up April 27th, and I certainly hope all of you can take part, spread the word, if you can't organize your own event, talk to some of your local environmental or student groups and try to get them involved. And if you go to the Save the Frogs Day page, just check out the events that took place in previous years, which will give you lots of ideas on fun, educational ways to get your community involved. So Save the Frogs Day, I certainly hope it continues to grow every year, and I think it is our single best way to get people involved, to get people helping out, donating, get media attention, find new people for our cause, etc. So it's really important, and it's also a lot of fun. Everybody has a good time on Save the Frogs Day. I know I always do. Some other projects locally in Santa Cruz. We've been going out to this pond and doing habitat restoration for California red-legged frogs, which are threatened by non-native bullfrogs, non-native fish, non-native crayfish, all that eat them there. And the pond's surrounded by non-native weeds, which makes it bad habitat for them. So on 5 or 6 occasions, we've gotten groups of 50 or 60 volunteers out there clearing out non-native weeds, planting native vegetation. This high school helped us put in a fence in the water to keep fish out of the egg-laying area of the California red-legged frogs, which have a lot of trouble at the pond. Other things I do, my 211th presentation on amphibians. So I've directly educated well over 10,000 people at my presentations, most of them live presentations at schools, universities, other nonprofits, businesses, trying to get lots of people involved in our efforts. Last year went to North Carolina, spoke at a bunch of schools there. San Francisco, we've been educating schools through the San Francisco Tadpole Head Start program. And San Francisco's got lots of frog issues. Frog leg eating center of the Western Hemisphere. They've got a mayor who vetoed legislation that would have protected frogs. So it's really important that we educate San Francisco kids about frogs. This is an American bullfrog, and as I said, they got imported into California over 100 years ago, and they're still coming in by the millions every year, mainly for use as food, mainly from frog farms outside the U.S. where the frogs have diseases, and they get here, they escape or get set free, eat native frogs, and there's no reason to continue to import bullfrogs into the state because we know that they're bad for our ecosystem. So we got the city and county of Santa Cruz to ban the importation of bullfrogs. And I've been meeting with various politicians in the state to try to get them banned statewide. And we do have a petition, SaveTheFrogs.com/bullfrogs. If any of you are in California, then please sign the petition and get other people to sign it. And hopefully we can get bullfrogs banned by the end of this year. That's my goal. And I think that would be probably our largest environmental victory aside from straight up educating millions of people around the world. If we got the entire state to ban bullfrogs, that would be really huge. And I think it's going to happen. It's just that politicians are very, very slow to act from my experience. We got a restaurant in San Francisco and a restaurant in Monterey to stop serving wild-caught frogs. We also got 76 supermarkets to give up their frog leg sales. And that supermarket did that because for a while I had a volunteer who was doing nothing but sending out letters to lots of restaurants and supermarkets. And sometimes that's all it takes, just sending out letters. Right now I've got a list of about 500 different businesses that sell frog legs. If anyone ever is interested in frog legs, then, or if you know someone who may want to help, then you can help by contacting all these businesses. I get a question, what would you say to someone who was justified eating frog legs because they were a native species that was out of control? A native species going out of control. So I can't think of too many native frog species that are at plague-like proportions as they supposedly were thousands of years ago. But to anyone who's saying that we should eat frog legs because we're humans and we have the right to eat whatever we want and don't tell me what to eat, and frogs are just like chickens or cows or pigs or sheep or goats or all those other things we eat, well, frogs are rapidly going extinct, and all those farm animals are not. So that's number one. Frog leg trade is highly unregulated, spreading all kinds of diseases, many that we've never even identified because there are so few amphibian disease biologists on the planet. So we're spreading lots of diseases, and aside from that, which is enough to not be eating frog legs, certainly if we're in America or Canada, we have other options for food that are less environmentally damaging. And final reason, my job is to save the frogs. So I tell people to eat something else. Okay, so we can talk more about frog legs later. We got a half an hour, so let me try to keep going so that we leave some time for questions. Mountain yellow-legged frogs. We got lots of Save the Frog supporters writing our California government and the National Park Service. So 707 letters to get the National Park Service to start removing non-native fish from about 60 water bodies in Sequoia Kings Canyon Park. That's going through. Save the Frogs supporters helped get California Fish and Game Commission to vote to give endangered species protections to the mountain yellow-legged frogs. So it's really important to send in letters because if we don't do it, then not many other people are, except for potentially people in opposition for whatever reason. There's almost always opposition to any kind of legislation because there's always various groups who, fishing groups want the fish to remain. There's developers who don't want any new species getting any kind of endangered species status because it makes them harder to build. So it's really important for us to write our legislators, many of whom are not necessarily going to vote on behalf of frogs unless there's a big public push for it. I do my best to go somewhere internationally each year as frogs are disappearing all around the world, not just here in California. So I gave a training course at the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute a few years ago, teaching 25 Latin American biologists how to detect the Kitteridge fungus so that they'd be able to do their research. Went to Korea and met with 4 different nonprofit organizations and was the official USA representative at Korea's first International Amphibian Symposium, and met with a lot of people to discuss their amphibian conservation issues and how they can get amphibian conservation projects going in Korea. Save the Frogs Ghana, I founded with the assistance of Gilbert Adam a year and a half ago. I went to Ghana. 90% of West Africa's rainforests have been destroyed. They have lots of environmental problems, lots of social problems, not a lot of environmental education. Only 2 total amphibian biologists in the country when I went there. So main goal, inspire youth and students to pursue environmental careers. So I spoke at schools and at the university. We now have 3 different universities in Ghana with Save the Frogs chapters. Gilbert Adam is full-time executive director of Save the Frogs Ghana, working to create Ghana's 6th national park, the Atiwa Hills National Park, to protect the Togo slippery frog, which lives on only 2 total streams on the planet, both in the Atiwa Hills, which are under threat from mountaintop mining, mountaintop removal mining for bauxite, which is where aluminum comes from. So working on getting the national park created and reducing the consumption of frog legs, especially in the northern region where they eat a lot of frog meat. And it's mostly our university chapter students helping out with the frog meat campaign. So check out savethefrogs.com/Ghana if you haven't already. Went to Mexico in November and spoke at their largest conference of amphibian biologists and got a lot of people interested in Save the Frogs. So I expect a lot of Save the Frogs Day activity there this year. Belize, Michael Starkey, Save the Frogs biologist, has been going down there doing some education work, and we are going to Belize in July. We still have some spots left on our eco tour. It's going to be me, Michael, and a professor from Sacramento. And both Michael and the professor have been to Belize many, many times. I've been there once. So we're going to have 3 biologists plus local guides educating people about the rainforest, frogs, native wildlife. So if you know anyone who wants to go, please let them know. We got the New Zealand government to block a proposal for mining that would have destroyed habitat where the Hochstetter's frogs live, and Archie's frog, which is one of the world's most endangered amphibian species. It almost certainly would have gone extinct had that mining taken place. Gotten about 18 schools to give up their dissection programs in exchange for free software, virtual dissection software that we give them. I know that we could get a lot more schools abandoning their dissection programs if we had somebody dedicated to the campaign. So if any of you are into getting dissections stopped, or if you know someone who may be, then it would be great to have you helping out. And again, what this comes down to is contacting lots of schools, telling them about the problems with dissections and our offer to give them free dissection software. Gotten lots of schools building frog ponds. It's really good education for students. Whenever I speak at a school where there are frogs on the property, the students are always way more into frogs. So more frogs on the property is better for educating students, and it's It's also habitat for frogs. We destroy habitat all the time, so let's build habitat. We get free advertising space at a lot of airports. We have to pay for the printing, so it's still expensive enough that we can't do it too often, but we like to get these big, sometimes 12-foot long posters up in airports. This one's up in Denver or O'Hare. I can't remember which one, but we have these big ads up in Denver, O'Hare, Atlanta, Orlando, Baltimore, Washington. Lots of airports that get a lot of traffic, educating tens of thousands of people. Art contests been very successful, a great way to get teachers who may not have any frog biology knowledge to still be able to get their students involved. And you can tell from the artwork that comes in that the students have been to SaveTheFrogs.com and got educated about frogs, which is at least half the goal of the art contest. Get people educated, thinking about frogs. Poetry contest also been very successful, and again, you can tell from the poems that a lot of these students have learned a lot about frogs from our website, preparing to write their poetry. We're putting together a book of the best frog poetry and frog art to sell and raise money and awareness for the frogs. Hey, all of you are going to be volunteering through Save the Frogs Academy. The idea for Save the Frogs Academy, I guess long ago I thought, hey, we should have a Save the Frogs Academy. Probably thought that a couple years ago. But then in late November, it hit me, hey, how can we make our volunteer program a lot more successful? Let's kind of get it a lot more organized and get people to collaborate, so it's not just one-off volunteers that I'm working with one-on-one. Let's get people collaborating, get a lot of people together for all these different issues, for different projects that need to get done, and it'll be a lot better way to train people so that they can become independent doing this, and we'll get a lot more ideas because everyone's going to be talking, and we'll get a lot more total output because there will be more people involved. So almost done with this presentation, and then we'll have questions and I can discuss Save the Frogs Academy more closely. Thanks to all of you who have donated to Save the Frogs and for spreading the word, because it is how we exist. We get no money from the federal government or any state government, and we don't get too much money from corporations, though happily we have been getting more money from corporations. We won, sorry, let me fix somebody's, here we go. Yeah, we won $25,000 from Chase Bank a year and a half ago. We won $10,000 from Nature's Path cereal recently. Those were both, at least in part, from Facebook voting contests. So thanks to all our Facebook supporters for voting for us. And the Body Shop recently gave us some money. We're working on some other companies as well. So it's good to see companies giving a bit more money to the environment these days. And if any of you know people who work at companies and they want to help out in any way or sponsor Save the Frogs Day, it'll get them good publicity and be a good use of their philanthropic dollars and help save the frogs. So always keep that in mind. Yeah, the newsletter, as you go about your Save the Frogs Academy efforts and you start meeting and talking to and getting emails from people who are interested in Save the Frogs, please collect their emails. Start a little spreadsheet, first name, last name, email address, city, state, country if you have it. And let's get these people getting our newsletter, because the newsletter, second to the website itself, is the most important thing that we have going, because it's how we get all our new campaigns out to people, keep people educated, motivated, connected, etc. So when you get an email, a newsletter, please forward it on also to anyone who may want to see it. If anyone wants info cards, these 4x6-inch info cards, we've got thousands of them. They cost us about 3 cents each. So if you want some, then we can send you some, and you can post them up somewhere visible or hand them to friends, students, etc. Use them at your events. Okay, so with that, I am going to, let's see, we've got 20 official minutes. I can certainly stay as long as people have questions, but in the next 20 minutes, let's take some questions, also talk about Save the Frogs Academy. So maybe if we have random questions for 10 minutes, and then we'll talk about Save the Frogs Academy more generally. So you can chat me a question, or you can just say, please unmute me, and I'll unmute you, and you can actually ask a question into your microphone that everyone should hear. All right, so sounds like we don't have any questions, which means I must have done an amazing job explaining everything. So hopefully that's the case. Okay. Where is the money going that is donated? Now, do you mean in general, how to Save the Frogs spend donation money? Okay, so I don't think we have our 2012 data yet. Our 2011 uses of money, 90% of the money went directly to programs. About 8% went to administration, and 2% went to fundraising. So 90% going to programs is far better than the average nonprofit. It's because we're a small organization with very little bureaucracy that sucks up money. So it's going to the programs, which means it's going to materials, telecommunications, various software and things we use to get the word out. It's going to pay our staff, which all of us, including myself, get paid far less than the average person with our credentials. And various whatever costs arise without wasting it in things like sending out tons of fundraising letters, which we do once a year maximum. So only 2% of our money went to fundraising. Some of it at the admin costs, things like that, legal fees, rent, phone bills, things like that. So we use the money very well. Our total revenues since we started Save the Frogs in 2008, I think it was about $7,000 the first year, then $37,000, and then about $120,000 for 2 years in a row, and then last year about $195,000. So for the same, we get a whole entire worldwide movement going for far less money than most nonprofits have. So hope that answered your question. Okay, in California, developers have very strong political pull. What's a good way to combat their influence? Yeah, let's see. That's difficult because they have a lot of money, and I know when I meet with politicians, I usually get, I'd love to help out, but the economy's number one, which is an excuse, and all of our economy depends on natural resources. You can't build houses if there's no trees to chop down to build houses, etc. I once saw a good piece of graffiti on a big incinerator in downtown Melbourne, Australia that said "No jobs on a dead planet." So we need to educate politicians that the environment is important, and we need to vote for politicians who are not developers themselves. I'm pretty sure that on our California Fish and Game Commission, which has 5 people, that at least one of them, his job is he owns a company that builds houses and does construction. So how'd those people get there? They get there because we vote for politicians that are the kind of people who put them there. So that's all I can say. But we need to educate the public so that the public does not support that or the type of votes that they, type of anti-environmental votes that they potentially put in. Any other questions? All right, so keep them coming if you have questions. Save the Frogs Academy. So starting next week, we're going to have 2 different classes. And I don't know if class is the best name to call it. I don't know what we should call them. Groups, classes, projects, whatever it is. The idea is, at least for now, they're online classes. Hopefully one day we'll have a space where we can have in-person classes and people actually get together and sit at a table in a room. But for now, fortunately, we can get people from all over the world on a webinar like this or on a Skype session or teleconference, talking on the phone, however we do it, to get people focused on one specific issue. So we decided to test it out with 2 classes. One is Save the Frogs Day, which I wanted because, as I said, Save the Frogs Day, I think, is our most successful and it's our most successful project, and it's a project that has the highest potential to get the most people involved and have the highest impact. So the bigger Save the Frogs Day gets, the better we get at running it, coordinating it. It's got huge potential. So I wanted to have one about Save the Frogs Day. So what we're going to be doing is meeting, and I'll give an introduction to Save the Frogs Day, and I'll tell you my ideas on how Save the Frogs Day can be improved, what kind of things need to get done based on my 5 years of coordinating Save the Frogs Day. And then we'll also brainstorm, and everybody can put in their thoughts on what types of things should get done over the next few months to make Save the Frogs Day as successful as possible and reach our goal of 300 educational events in 50 countries. And then we will divvy up tasks, or people can volunteer to do certain things. I always prefer people doing what interests them the most. The more passionate you are about what you're doing, the better job you're going to do. So we'll get lots of people helping promote Save the Frogs Day, and I will be giving some personalized advice and instruction and assistance to each person. And the other class is Lake Erie toads, which I did not even talk about during this presentation. About a year and a half ago, I found out that the Canadian government was potentially going to give permits to developers in Ontario to build a non-essential condominium and shopping complex on the banks of Lake Erie where there are Fowler's toads. Fowler's toads are not globally endangered, but they are endangered and do receive protections, at least on paper, in Canada. And I grew up with Fowler's toads, and I like Fowler's toads. And Fowler's toads can handle a little bit of human activity around them, which means that a lot of people on the east coast of North America grow up or should be growing up with Fowler's toads. It may be one of the few amphibian species that they see on a regular basis. And I know that I have a high chance. It's highly likely I ended up doing frog conservation work that I do because I grew up near a pond and with toads jumping all around. So even if it's not a globally endangered species, it's certainly an important species for educating people about amphibians. And so basically we sent in well over 1,000 letters to the Ontario government saying don't issue the permits because the toad population will get destroyed. This is a protected species and it's not an essential building, so don't allow it to happen, at least in the way it's currently planned to be built. And they did not appear to listen to us at all because the permit went through in precisely the way that it was originally stated before we sent our letters, which detailed the flaws in many aspects of the permit. So on top of it protecting the toads, I think this is a brilliant opportunity to educate people all throughout Canada about amphibians and Canada's apparently very anti-environmental policies. I'm not too familiar with Canadian politics, but the things I see in the last couple of years definitely make it sound like Canada's not very environmentally focused at the moment. And so a few months ago I sent out an email requesting donations for this campaign, and I'm pretty sure based on the fact that the Canadian government has authorized the developers to harm, harass, kill, collect, remove toads. I think those words which show up in endangered species permits in America and Canada have a pretty big emotional effect on people, so it's worth using it to our advantage in the future. Anyway, it was one of our more successful email donation campaigns. I usually only send out one total email requesting money for any certain project, and we raised somewhere between $1,000 and $1,500. So I thought, hey, let's use that for Save the Frogs Academy class to provide scholarships to students. And right now I think we only have 4 students for that class. I'd like to have 10 for each of these classes. Save the Frogs Day class is nearly full. But for both of them, if you know people who may be interested, my goal is that you spend 6 to 8 hours, I think for the Save the Frogs Day Academy and Lake Erie Toads classes, spend about 6 hours a week working on the project. And so if you know somebody who has time, motivation, interest to learn, I think that not only will these classes get a lot done as we're working in a group with a lot of people doing things, we're learning from each person's experience, giving advice to everybody, we'll get a lot accomplished. And I think this is a brilliant opportunity for you all, and I thank you all for taking the initiative to take part, because I have learned a lot about environmental conservation and organizing people and movements in the last 5 years that very few people have this knowledge. And even prior to Save the Frogs, I was a full-time teacher at various parts of my life and have taught lots of different things. So I think all of you are very smart to take advantage of this opportunity. It's my goal, as you may have inferred from the acceptance letters that you guys got, I want to give out all my knowledge to people. I want Save the Frogs to be able to run in my absence. I'm not planning to leave Save the Frogs anytime soon. It could happen, I'm not sure, but it's safest for the organization for certain to not be dependent on me. Certainly for the first few years of Save the Frogs, it was very dependent on me because I was the person who did most of everything. But now I'm always focused on getting the knowledge out to my staff, my volunteers, to everybody out there in the world, and we're getting closer to that point. And I know that if you take enough of these Save the Frogs Academy classes and you learn about lots of different things that we do and you actually go out and do things yourself, because doing things and experience is the best way to learn that you will become very adept at doing lots of those things that I do on a regular basis. So if you have questions about any aspect of Save the Frogs Academy, send it in. We got 5 minutes. Let me answer this one question we have, and then we'll talk a little bit about a little assignment for y'all. How did you get around the bauxite developers? We haven't gotten around any bauxite developers right now. I'm assuming that you're referring to our efforts in Ghana. So Ghana mining is one of their top 3 sources of income, and I'm fairly certain politicians take a big cut of any kind of money coming in. So politicians are pretty mining friendly in Africa. So we have not gotten around any developers. Right now we're very focused on the students and the local community surrounding the Atiwa Hills to get them all educated and opposing the development or the mining, and to get them to realize you've got a lot more money coming in through long-term ecotourism and through having a healthy forest and healthy water than you have a chance at getting your hands on some money that's mostly going to go to the developers and the politicians, and they're going to destroy your forest and take off. So we do plan to increase our efforts to educate the politicians involved with it as well. Okay, so basically for each, the way Save the Frogs Academy works as far as credit, right now we're not accredited by any university. Hopefully one day we will be, or in some way that people can get credit that is transferable to other organizations should they want it. Regardless, we have a credit system just so we can track, and you can track how much work you've done, and it equates to 8 hours of effort equals 1 credit. And for every course you take, you'll spend some of that time writing up a final report. I'd like these final reports to be publicly viewable so that people know what you did, people get inspired, people read it and say, hey, that sounds pretty cool, I'd like to try out one of these academy courses. And it'll help to grow the academy, and it'll help your writing skills. Writing skills are very important, and it'll add content to the website that's of interest to people. So for each credit, I expect people to write 1 page roughly. So if you take a 3-credit class like, say, the Frogs Day class or Lake Erie Toads, you'll end it by writing up a 3-page report on everything you did, accomplished, anything that's worth mentioning, any successes, things like that. So for right now, this intro is a 1-credit course, and we've spent about an hour and a half here, so you've got about 6 hours or so of things to do. And you could do it, you know, ideally you'll do it over the next week and get it out of the way before the other classes start, but, you know, if you want 2 weeks or so, that's fine. And so Save the Frogs Academy in general, it's an experiment. I've never done this before. I have my ideas. You may have your ideas, and we'll figure it out as we go. I want everybody's input, and each time we do one of these classes, they'll get that much better because we'll figure out what works, what doesn't work, what people like to do, what gets people motivated, etc. So I have a little list of things to do over the next week that I help. My goal is that it'll help you prepare a bit for the upcoming classes. And sorry, I'm trying to find them right now. Okay, give me 1 second. Okay, so here's my ideas on how people can prepare themselves for the upcoming classes and make themselves more frog knowledgeable and fill up your time to get your one credit, your very first Save the Frogs Academy credit. I think everyone should spend 2 hours scanning through the Save the Frogs website, and I know you've all been there, but I've spent well over 1,000 hours making the website. I'm always adding to it. In all likelihood, there's far more stuff on it than you've seen. So I think if you do some surfing around, then you'll learn some new things and you'll get more familiar with the website. And I know that whenever I talk to anybody, when people email me, I very often write them and say, hey, here's the URL to this page that you should see. So the more you know the website, the better you can spread our mission as well. So that's 2 hours surfing Save the Frogs website. And then I think everyone should spend 1 hour surfing other amphibian websites. So you can do a Google search. Just surf the web, learn about amphibians, learn some cool frog facts, and just, the more you know about amphibians, the better you can spread your message to people. And I highly recommend people going to amphibiaweb.org and familiarizing yourself with how it works. And I think I'll email you all a summary of this and probably come up with a little assignment, such as going to amphibiaweb.org and telling me about the threats to a critically endangered species in some random country, just so that I know you know how to use their database to find out about the various amphibians living in certain countries or various endangered species, etc., and other things to do. Give me 1 second. Okay, spend an hour promoting Save the Frogs. So however you want to promote it, calling people, emailing people, forwarding our stuff on to people, posting stuff on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, writing up a letter to your local paper, going to our Spread the Word page, which has lots of downloadable stuff, some of them out of date, but there's plenty of stuff that's usable on there. Promoting Save the Frogs is incredibly important, so spend an hour doing that. And then spend an hour taking action by whatever is of interest to you from a campaign's perspective. If you're against dissections, write a few schools. You can go to our actions page, take action, and sign some petitions, call up a politician, just do something on behalf of frogs. And I can, I'll summarize this in an email. And then the final thing, 1 second. Okay, yeah, so final thing is spend an hour and a half writing a final report, which is 1 page, and maybe it won't take you an hour and a half. Maybe you're a fast writer. But write up a little final report of stuff you learned through all this and maybe anything, your future thoughts on things you want to do, or just something to show me that you learned something and get your writing skills, because you will be doing a lot of writing. I'm writing people all the time for Save the Frogs, writing emails, writing newsletters, writing content. So the more you write, the better. So that does come out to 8 hours. You've got an hour and a half right here, and then there's 6.5 hours, which is 2 hours scoping the Save the Frogs website, 1 hour looking through other amphibian websites. I won't even say amphibian. If you just want to go to other environmental groups' websites, just learn about environmental issues or amphibians is fine. Spending an hour promoting Save the Frogs through whatever means you want, an hour taking action and doing something related to one of our campaigns, or if you just want to spend an extra hour promoting, because that's environmental education, that's taking action in some respect for certain. And then an hour and a half to write up a final report, which is, it's pretty much up to you. Write a page, 300 words or so, about something you learned, or whatever comes to mind. And so those are my thoughts. If you all have thoughts on how we should spend that time, 6.5 hours to get your credit and to make sure you're very prepared for the classes that are coming up, then you can chat them to me, or I can unmute you, and I'm open for discussion on any of this stuff. It's just my goal to make sure you guys know as much about amphibians and get a little, get warmed up for the classes. And again, this is perhaps or there won't be many times at Save the Frogs Academy where you're just kind of doing research like this. Most of the time, it's going to be you're actually doing something that somebody needs, or that needs to get done. So do you all have any thoughts on this 6.5 hours worth of stuff that I just said, which again doesn't have to be done this week, though you may want to get it done. Probably better get it done, get it off your mind. Otherwise, probably 2 weeks max to do it. And then again, you get your credit. Save the Frogs Academy, my current vision, it's just pass fail. I'm not going to be giving you A's or D's or whatever. Pass fail, which pretty much comes down to, did you write your final report and appear to put in an honest effort? Do we just email you the final paper as an attachment is the question. I had not even thought about that, but I think you should. Oh, and I think your final paper, it should probably say, what did you do with the 6.5 hours, maybe talk about each little part, or it's kind of up to you. But yes, I think put it as a Microsoft Word file, because then I can just put it in a final state that if it went public online, then there it is. So, put your name, don't put your home address. You can put your email address if you're fine to have people emailing you should they ever see that and want to email you. But yeah, put it in a Microsoft Word document. I'll turn it into a PDF and theoretically put it online. So make it something that you're proud for people to read. So I'm open for questions, and we're over time. Sorry about that. We'll attempt to keep these things on time, but I'm here to take any questions that anyone sends. So here's one. And if anyone wants to sign off right now, then go for it, because we're over time. So I'll say this officially ends the very first, the inaugural Save the Frogs Academy class, and thank you all very much for attending. Don't go unless you have to, because we still have some questions. Are there any groups, organizations that you have encountered which are more strongly resistant or supportive to Save the Frogs? Yeah, there's definitely lots of groups that support Save the Frogs. A lot of the large environmental groups, National Wildlife Federation, Center for Biological Diversity, Natural Resources Defense Council, the NRDC, and lots of smaller nonprofit organizations, lots of schools. Schools are always very into Save the Frogs. Most environmental groups support what we do. We have very little resistance from any kind of environmental group, but there are groups that do. Any of our campaigns, if the campaign were easy, if there was no opposition, the campaign would have finished immediately. But there's almost always opposition. The pesticide companies don't want pesticides banned. The people who sell frogs and import frogs into the country for pets don't want any kind of disease regulations. people who construct buildings on frog habitat or drain swamps in order to play golf on frog habitat don't want anybody telling them not to do that because they have money at stake or they have their, golf course at stake, etc. So there's always people who oppose things. Frog restaurants don't want anybody telling them what kind of food to serve. Any other questions? Anyone want to talk? I can unmute people. Okay, well, sounds like that's it. So I hope you all found this beneficial, and I will send you all information very soon on the upcoming classes and how to log into that. And let's see, I think we have a video recording of this class that I may put online as well. We do have another question. If someone wanted to take a course but postpone some of the work until summer, would that be possible? So I'm not sure what that means, as in they're going to listen in each week and then not do the work until summer. That, I don't know that if that's what you meant, I don't know if that would work too well, because the whole point of the course is that you're doing things now, and then each week you're reporting, everybody's reporting back to everybody else and saying, hey, this is what I did this week, and this is what I want to do next week. And everybody will say, hey, this was good, this wasn't so good, here's what you should do, and everything will get refined. Okay, will we offer the courses again in the summer? It's unlikely that we'll offer the same courses again in the summer. If you go to the SaveTheFrogs.com/classes page, you'll see that I've listed up about 60 different classes that I have ideas to give. So it also partly comes down to, so our limiting factors are there's only so much time for me to lead these courses, and there's a lot of courses. And so it comes down to what's most important at the moment, what are people interested in. If we run one of these courses and all the participants love it, which I hope they will, and they all have time again and want to continue it, then yeah, there's certainly a chance that it'll, we could get that going again, or we could even do it, if everyone takes, say, I'm assuming you're asking about the Lake Erie Toads class, say people take it and it was really good and there's still more work to be done, then come the summer, maybe it can even run without me, in that we can get it organized and someone can take charge and just kind of handle and coordinate everything, and people can keep doing things. And I just have to see, my current thought was that come summer we'd probably be doing different classes because there's so much to get done as far as different things go. But, time will tell. It's all a work in progress, so we'll just take it as it comes. But if you know somebody and they're interested, then definitely I would be trying to get them to do stuff now. And also because time is not on our side when it comes to saving amphibians. The more we get done, the sooner, the better off we are. So Nurul says we should introduce each participant. We probably should have done that at the start. How many people do we have? We've got 5 of you online right now. So how about, if people want to talk, I'm going to unmute you. You don't have to, but how about just give like a 60-second introduction. So I'm going to start with Nurul from Save the Frogs, Bangladesh. Nurul, you're on.
Yeah,
Hi.
I'm Nurul from Save the Frogs, Bangladesh. Hi.
Hi.
Uh,
So do you want to say
Mary.
something about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Nurul from Set the Frogs, Bangladesh, and previously I ran Set the Frogs Day programs in Bangladesh, and I'm pleased to participate in this Set the Frogs Academy programs now. Thank you to all.
Okay. Thank you. Marie, if you would like to say anything, then you're on the air.
Okay, hi, I'm Marie Janicki. I'm from Buffalo, the University of Buffalo. My background is in biology, and my interest is in saving the Lake Erie toads and in trying to convince the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources that the permit to destroy the toad's habitat doesn't make sense in light of the fact that Ontario law prohibits destroying their habitat. So the problem is trying to find out some way to get past what's clearly the economic interests of the developers who want to build the condo. And it's apparent that the Ministry of the people who work for the Ministry of Natural Resources must be having some kind of pressure on them to to not fulfill their mandate of protecting the toads, or else you would think their natural inclination as environmentalists, I would assume some of them are environmentalists, would be to protect the toads. So there's a lot of politics to try to understand, and that's what I'm interested in trying to look at.
Okay. Thanks, Marie. Yeah, so it's our job to make sure that they get pressure from the public as well and people who do care about the environment. All right, so let's see. Choti, if you want to say something, you're currently self-muted and I cannot unmute you. So if you know how to unmute yourself, it looks like you're unmuted. Hi.
Hi, I'm Choti. I'm in Colorado, USA. I was self-muted because I have very noisy dogs in the background.
It's all right.
I'm really interested in, thank you very much, Kerry, for the first class. It was very informative. I'm interested in, the whole eating of frogs, frog legs, getting information across. I think there are more people out there in the public that would respond to the impact on humans, just generally from the adult perspective. Then there would be interest in, saving frogs or animals or even the environment. I think that's the way the world is going now, especially in USA. I feel if people feel it has a negative impact to them or their children, they will be more responsive. Similarly, for dissections in schools, I think given that I have a child in school, I would really like to focus on that. It's an area that we can reduce some of the unnecessary killing of frogs. I have a question, since I'm online, just about the classes. You have the next 2 classes that are going to be running simultaneously on different days. I don't really think it's possible for me to take 2 classes or projects a week, given that I work and life. So I was wondering about that. Are you going to run enough classes that we can just take one at a time?
Yeah, it was my assumption that probably nobody would be taking both of the classes. You'd have to be, kind of not in school or only working part-time or something in order to have that much time. So yeah, it was my assumption that people would choose whichever one was of most interest to them, and I purposely put the Lake Erie class at a time of day when people on the East Coast would be not in work. So yeah, I was, for you, Choti, I'd assume the better one for you to take is the Save the Frogs Day class.
Yeah.
Unless you have a specific interest in the toad. So basically, it's kind of 2 different kind of classes. One is about everything's education focused, but one straight up education is the goal and one is an actual campaign. So it's just, you know, I figured the people taking Lake Erie toads would either be from Canada or have a specific interest in campaigns.
Okay.
All right. Okay, and then Lindsay, if you are there, it looks
here.
like you would have, hi, how's it going?
Excellent. No.
Okay, do you want to say something about yourself or anything else?
Sure. My name is Lindsay King. I'm currently in Folsom, California, which is a suburb of Sacramento. I'm planning on going back to grad school because my goal in life is to help amphibians. I wrote my undergrad thesis on the decline of the western spade-foot toad, so that's really where my interest is helping those little guys, because California loves nothing more than putting tract houses and Safeways on their habitats, so I'm a little biased when it comes to that. That's me.
Okay, excellent. All right, so that concludes our first Save the Frogs Academy class. So I hope you all found it useful, and I'll be emailing you all shortly with a summary of our to-do list to get your credit for this class. And again, please spread the word to anyone you know who may be interested, as we do still have some scholarships, and I think it is a fabulous opportunity for anybody who is interested in protecting the environment. Okay, have a great day. Save the frogs.